Next up in our review is Vanderbilt taking down number 11 South Carolina 31-7. The Commodores putting a beating on the Gamecocks in this game. Dalton, we had a commenter in the chat, Jimmy West, saying that the most surprising result for him this weekend was Vanderbilt winning. He says, I keep thinking Vanderbilt will revert back to the norm, and it doesn't seem to be happening.
No, Diego's the Dragon Slayer, man. And listen, there was a chance that if Vandy was going to win this game, you figured it'd be some heroics and it'd be close, it'd be a field goal or something. 31-7. This probably is the most shocking result of the whole weekend, considering even when Lenora Sellers was in the game in the first half, and you know, obviously we're going to talk about that and the injury and all of that, but Vanderbilt was the better team on the field, even in the first half with Sellers out there. So the fact that they just went in and soundly outplayed South Carolina the way they did, I agree. That part of it is the most shocking part of the weekend.
Let's go over the highest graded players, starting off with the victorious Vanderbilt Commodores, starting off with Brandon Fontenette, the corner/safety for them, 86.9. CJ Hurd, 81.5, the safety. Jordan White, 69.3, the center. Eli Stowers, who I think is the best tight end in the country, with a 68.8 grade in this one. Jordan Matthews, the cornerback, 68.6. And Diego Pavia, the quarterback, with a 51.3 grade in the win for Vanderbilt. Let's go over to South Carolina with their highest graded players in the loss. Defensive tackle Nick Barrett, 78.6. Cornerback Brandon Cece, with a 76.4 grade. Nick Harbor, 76 grade, the wide receiver. Justin Okoronkwo, the linebacker, 74.3. Rasul Faison, the running back, 71.9. And Luke Doty, the quarterback, with a 69.1 grade, because unfortunately, Lenora Sellers went out with a concussion early on in this game. Dalton, what told the story for you?
So Vanderbilt so efficient in the passing game, and Pavia, his grade's lower than you might think because he had a fumble and he had a really bad interception. It was either late in the third or early in the fourth quarter that gave South Carolina like one last pulse down 14. It was probably the worst throw I've seen Pavia make in about a year and a half, but a .740 EPA per pass in this game, and it was a lot of yards after catch. It was Pavia being efficient underneath. And honestly, we know him as a more vertical passer to complement this passing game. But you look at even a throw like that you see on the video right there. That's a check down. He's moving up in the pocket. He's just dumping the ball off to Cedric Alexander, and he's letting Alexander on the outside do the work after the catch. That was a big theme in this game. Diego Pavia on throws under 10 yards, 15 of 16 for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. 106 of his 177 passing yards came after the catch. And a big thing for me is that he was able to, and look, Vanderbilt doesn't have a spectacular offensive line. It's better this year with Jordan White and those guys up front. It's better this year than it was last year, but it's not a spectacular offensive line. Pavia did such a great job in this game getting rid of the football. 2.6 second average time to throw, and he was only under pressure 22% of the time. Last year against South Carolina, that was 3.1 seconds, and he was under pressure 51% of the time. Now, South Carolina's pass rush was better last year, was deeper last year with all those veteran guys they had, but Diego Pavia, again, normally when we see him have a good game with his arm, and other than the interception, I really thought he did have a good game passing. He's generally a vertical passer who's going to hold the football, who's going to throw the ball down the field, and when he gets outside the pocket, he's looking for big plays. He took a more conservative approach in this game, A, in the second half especially, knowing they had a lead, and B, understanding, look, this South Carolina secondary is still really good, and I'm not just going to get free shots on him, and I cannot hold the football waiting for Dylan Stewart to come get me in the pocket. I thought Vanderbilt in the passing game just handled everything they possibly could have here perfectly, absolutely. And then when Sellers was out of the game and they were working against a backup quarterback and just understanding, again, except for the interception, I believe it was late in the third quarter, that was the only play all night where I felt like, what are you doing? But other than that, I thought just a spectacular game in the passing game, not the flashiest game, not the highest graded game of Pavia's career, but the best approach to beat this football team and just have control of this game. And that was a big part of them winning heavily time of possession also, right? I mean, I just thought Clark Lee and Jason Beck and this coaching staff and what this offense is doing, they're a threat any given week they step on the field, and it's not same old Vanderbilt. This team can beat anybody on any given day.
Yeah, and really a big reason why Vanderbilt can win like this with Pavia only grading somewhere in the 50s is because their defense was outstanding. Negative 0.303 EPA per pass for South Carolina. This was a completely opposite stat for me is South Carolina's EPA per pass. Much of that had to do, obviously, with Lenore Sellers getting hurt after only taking 9 dropbacks. We're leaving with a concussion in this game. But he and Luke Doty both had like a 70 passing grade in this one. Both of them threw an interception in this one too. South Carolina's offensive line, which has been an issue for them in years past, really, was phenomenal in this game. They only let up 3 pressures all game to Vanderbilt, but the receivers really struggled to get open for South Carolina, and Lenora Sellers and then Luke Doty could not elevate that supporting cast for them either. This is a game where I thought South Carolina needed Rasul Faison to really go off against Vanderbilt, and he didn't do that. He had a solid game, but nothing special. They needed special from their run game in this one with Luke Doty playing most of the game. They couldn't get it, and that's why you see Vanderbilt winning by 24 points.
This was my concern with South Carolina going into the year. One, the defensive talent that they lost, and it's still a good defense.
Yeah.
But last year, to me, this was one of the 5 best defenses in college football. They are not a top 5 defense in college football this year. They are probably a top 25 defense, which is obviously still very good. But when you're dealing with an offensive attack like this and the attacks that you're going to see in the SEC, it's a little bit more, you're asking more of your offense. And you mentioned the offensive line hasn't been great. In general, South Carolina's through 3 games, the Virginia Tech game, even the South Carolina State game last week, it took them an entire half to get the ball rolling. And in those 2 games, they got 3 punt return touchdowns from Vakari Swain as well, right? So South Carolina's offensive execution, even with Sellers on the field, has not been particularly good. Part of that is the offensive line, and I think there's just still, to me, and I know Sellers is getting number 1 draft pick hype and all this stuff, their offense to me is still an idea. It's still something that comes in flashes. Yes, there's explosive plays, right? There's the explosive runs from Sellers and escaping the pocket and the deep post to Nick Harbor against Virginia Tech. But drive to drive, this team doesn't execute at the rate that you think they would considering the talent level. Part of it is up front. They're not very good up front. They weren't very good up front last year. And then you just have this lack of accuracy and lack of execution, especially to me in their passing game. I'll say it again. When Sellers is on the field, I'm just doing everything I can for him to not get outside the hash marks. I think that's where that's at right now. And the other thing for me with South Carolina, it just feels like just such an idea, doesn't it? Where it's just you have to be more consistent than this. And I think aside from Sellers breaking the pocket and doing special things as an athlete, they're not executing at a high level. I think, honestly, if Sellers would have played this whole game from what I saw in the first half, I think Vandy wins this game anyway. South Carolina has not fully executed on offense for 3 games. I understand the talent. I understand the size and the speed and measurables and all of that. But look, all of a sudden, they just lost to Vanderbilt at home. And their schedule's absolutely brutal. This is the scenario I was worried about for South Carolina, is you trip up in a game like this, and you're not executing the way you should, and your defense is not a top 5 defense, and it was never going to be with all the guys they lost in the NFL, they are up against it against Missouri next week.
Oh, yeah.
They have to go to Missouri next week. We'll see what Sellers' status is for that. They are up against it because you want a team that's executing on offense. It's the Missouri Tigers right now, and that's on the road, and they really need to find a way, South Carolina, to just get more consistent on offense, or they're in huge trouble, I think.
South Carolina currently is 86th in the country in overall offensive grade this year. I mean, nothing is going well at all for this offense, whether it be Sellers has been up and down as a passer, the run game has been up and down. The pass blocking for South Carolina has improved this year, but we've seen issues from it before too. The receiving core hasn't been great. I mean, just all around hasn't not been working for South Carolina's offense this year. When you don't have, like Dalton said, you don't have an elite defense to win you ball games. This is what happens sometimes when you lose by 24 points to Vanderbilt. And credit to Vanderbilt, man, because they are doing an incredible job under Clark Lee right now. And we'll get to our top 25 later on in the show. They're going to be very high up in the top 25 for their 3-0 start to the season. But Dalton, what impressed you most from Vanderbilt's win in this game?
You know, anytime I get to talk about somebody who transferred up to the SEC from FAU, I'm going to do it. How about the safety CJ Hurd, 84.3 coverage grade, 11 tackles, 5 stops, 3 targets for 7 yards allowed, end of pressure. Maxey's a top 15 safety in the country right now, 82.8 PFF grade through 3 weeks. He's Vanderbilt's highest graded starter on defense. He had a really solid year last year at FAU. He's an excellent football player, and he's taken another step in this year at Vanderbilt. I think this Vanderbilt defense, I'll say this, and they were spectacular. They gave only 7 points to South Carolina in this game. Are they the best defense in the country? No, but I'll tell you they're a deeper defense than they were last year, and it's transfers like CJ Hurd coming in who have made them a lot better. This team all the way around is dangerous, and they believe they can win any football game. And tell you what, they got a couple of winnable games coming up the next few weeks. They may walk into Alabama a few weeks from now, 5-0, and boy, oh boy, is this the team Alabama and their defense. This is the type of team they hate seeing. They already lost to them once last year. Vandy's even legitimately better than they were last year. This is going to be fun to watch the rest of the way.
I'm going with Vanderbilt's just overall secondary in this game because they were outstanding in this one. And Dalton, how about this? Ready for this? Vanderbilt right now has the 8th best coverage grade in college football at 90.4 through 3 weeks. Here are the previous years for Vanderbilt. Ready? 97th in coverage grade last year, 118th in 2023, 112th in 2022, 103rd in 2021, 121st in 2020, 119th in 2019, 90th in 2018. We're talking about a Vanderbilt secondary that was legitimately horrendous, one of the worst in college football over the last, 7 years? And now all of a sudden it's playing like a top 10 secondary in the country as of right now through 3 weeks. Now, of course, Virginia Tech and South Carolina, their passing games have been up and down this year, really more down than up, I should say, this year. But Vanderbilt, man, they really improved that secondary, it seems like, and credit to them because really they held this team back even last year too, even though they made a bowl game last year in a great year. That was mostly because of Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers and that offense carrying that defense on its back. If you have a Vanderbilt defense that's performing like this too to help out Diego Pavia and that offense, and you have the 8th best coverage grade in the country, all of a sudden Vanderbilt is going to be a legitimate contender in the SEC like this.
Think about stylistically what that does. This is a team that wants to control the football and control time of possession, and the one thing that can counter that, right, is teams making explosive plays in the passing game and scoring quickly on you. If you don't allow that, and your defense as well as dragging teams every week into this ball control style of game that they want to play with Pavia, with Cedric Alexander, with their offense, with that run game that's so diverse. And look, at the end of the day, they still want to run the football first and foremost. If their defense allows them to drag teams into that style of game, they're extremely dangerous. And this is a team with their offense nobody wants. This is one of the hardest teams in the country for defensive coordinators to prepare for, this Vanderbilt team. We saw it at New Mexico State. We saw it last year with Vandy. Diego Pavia. And then when all else fails, if it's a close game, Diego Pavia is just going to find a way to will you to a win. This is an incredible run they're on. And we're going to be talking about Vanderbilt every single week this year. Just about. Maybe the next couple they have winnable games, but boy, when they get to their SEC schedule, it's going to be fun.
When they pulled off those massive victories last year, it was always Diego Pavia just willing this team in a shootout. Like, remember that Alabama game where both teams were putting up 40 points? If you have a defense that's letting up 7 points to South Carolina, I know it was Luke Doty for most of the game too, but still, that's a major, major development for Vanderbilt. And now all of a sudden you go from a team that was a Cinderella story but still an above average SEC team last year. Now we're talking about a legitimate college football playoff contender this year.
Last thing, they were down 20-10 to Virginia Tech at halftime. And they didn't allow a point in the second half of that game. They outscored Virginia Tech 34-0. They've given up 7 points in the last 6 quarters on the road in 2 extremely tough environments. Yeah, Vanderbilt's real, man. Diego Pavia is just continuing to lead this team to the promised land. It's crazy the run they've been on for over a year now.
Shout out Clark Lee for his defense and Steve Gregory, the defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt, too, for just turning around what was one of the worst secondaries in the country for the last 7-8 years. Now is playing at a top 10 level currently in 2025.